our scripture today is Genesis 37, carrying on from where we left off last week, starting at verse 12 through 36. So the first thing we have is a question for you. Well, actually, a statement that you guys get to talk. So you get to turn to your neighbor and share about a time or an event when someone was oblivious to what was happening around them. So if you're by yourself, you can't turn to anybody, so you need to literally talk to people at church. I know it's going to be a little bit weird. In the sanctuary, turning and talking real things. So share about a time or an event when someone was oblivious to what was happening around them. So part of why I bring that up is we talk about last week Joseph and his brothers. Joseph's 10 older brothers and 1 younger brother. And Joseph, last week we talked about, he got a coat and was a little bit oblivious as he was sharing his dreams to his family about what he knew. So I'm going to continue on and reading the scripture, Genesis 37:12. Now his brothers went to pasture their father's flock near Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, "Are not your brothers pasturing the flock at Shechem? Come, I will send you to them." And he said to him, "Here I am." So he said to him, "Go now, see if it is well with your brothers and with the flock, and bring me word." So he sent him from the valley of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. Okay, a couple things in there that Dave brought up last week, either during the sermon or while we were in afterthoughts. So if we remember Shechem, Shechem is the town where the brothers essentially destroyed everybody in the town where their sister was taken advantage of, where Dinah was. So they fled from Shechem after that. Jacob goes, "Hey, we should probably not hang out in this area because you guys just killed everybody in town, so we'll head down to Hebron." They ended up in Hebron because Jacob's father, Isaac, was ill and had just passed away. So they'd gone down there, and further stories about the brothers during that time we talked about last week were not good. So we talked about Reuben. Reuben made some mistakes with regards to one of his dad's wives and was dealing with that. Jacob and I had a little bit of a discussion on that this morning. But they went back up to Shechem. Shechem from Hebron is about 50 to 60 miles. And the valley of Hebron is where Isaac was, where it was actually a very good spot to be. That valley is a very fertile valley. There's lots of ability to have sheep and goats grazing there. Why did they take it 60 miles away? Were they trying to hide stuff? When we talk about brothers, and especially these specific brothers, they might have been trying to hide something from their dad. Or they didn't want to be seen. Or, hey, as we talked about in the first part of chapter 37, Joseph had just brought back bad word about his brothers. He was a tattletale. And so he has to walk 60 miles. Now, I'm thinking, Joseph is about 17 years old at this point. His dad sends him on a 60-mile journey to find his brothers on his own at 17. And all the 17-year-olds in here going, "Yeah, I could do that. Just give me the keys to the car, Dad." I'm looking at one right now who's asking, "Well, you didn't even let me drive to Nebraska." But on his own. And one of the things that we look at while he's going that 60 miles on his own, he kind of gets lost. And that brings us into the next verse there, verses 15 through 17. "And a man found him wandering in the fields." So this man, some theologians or historians think that this may or may not be an angel. We don't know. It doesn't say explicitly. But one of the things we do know is that God's plan is continuously working throughout this story. 50 to 60 miles to go to Shechem from Hebron. The man found him wandering in the fields, and then he asked him, "What are you seeking?" "I am seeking my brothers," he said. "Tell me, please, where they are pasturing the flock." And the man said, "They have gone away from where they've gone away. For I heard them say, 'Let us go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them in Dothan. Dothan is another 15 miles approximately northwest of Shechem. So another 15 miles out of the way. So now he's 65, 70 miles from the rest of his family. Now his dad could have sent anybody, right? One of the things we know about the family is that they're rather wealthy. They were wealthy before the whole incident with Shechem, and then they just looted a whole town and took all the flocks and all the families, all the kids and all the women from that town. And they're already wealthy before then and had many men working for him. But he sends his youngest son rather than a servant. Again, all these little questions as to the why. So he sends the son, boy number 10, to go and check on his brothers. Based on him tattling on his brothers, why would he send him? And how would his brothers feel? Which brings us to my next question for you to talk to each other about. Again, you have to talk to each other. How does it feel when someone less experienced or younger than you is put in a position of power over you, or in a position of leadership ahead of you? Ready, discuss. And what we're seeing here, and we're going to get into this next, that Joseph's brothers felt that way. Disrespected. They felt jealous. They were kind of in a frustrated mode that this young punk, that they may be 20 years older than, and these were rough dudes. Literally, they destroyed a whole town. Not just a couple chapters earlier. Sorry. And so they are definitely powerful men. Men who are physically able to dominate in their chosen field. They went off to herd their sheep and goats as a group of 10. Okay, the 10 older brothers. And everybody goes, weren't there 12 of them? Yes, there were. Joseph was number 11, and Benjamin was number 12. And so we get to other stories about shepherds, and it was just one of them, right? So David off by himself, taking care of the sheep and learning how to use his staff and play his fiddle or his lute. I always just think of him playing the fiddle because it's funner to say. But they went off as a group of 10 into an area where they had already essentially destroyed a town, may or may not have had other dealings in the area. We don't know, but probably not a great idea to go back to where you just destroyed a town. The neighbors might not be happy. But they had gone there as a group of 10, saying, I dare you to come after me. Because they're a strong bunch of guys. And then this little tiny little brother, little 17-year-old punk, that puts him at about a junior in high school. We know that juniors in high school know everything. They're at that point where parents can't talk to them because they know everything. Where they and their friends get together and they're convinced that they're smarter than everybody else. But those of us who are older recognize that one boy is a boy, two boys have half a brain. They get dumber the more they get together. So bringing that in, that's how these brothers are viewing Joseph. We get into verse 18. They saw him from afar, and before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. They said to one another, "Here comes this dreamer." Remember, he just told them the dreams about how they were going to bow down to him and that they're going to look at him as their leader. "Here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we will say that a fierce animal has devoured him, and we will see what will become of his dreams." All right, now another question that you get to deal with real life things, or share stories, because oftentimes those are more fun, especially apparently if you share them about other people. I stare at my wife on that one. Have you known someone who has tried or continuously tries to take advantage of situations or people's emotions for personal gain? Ready, go. Okay, well, we'll get into Joseph's brothers because this seemed to be a thing that they did a lot. That they took advantage of other people in other situations. We talked about that with Shechem, the city there, where they conned them into circumcision and then took advantage of them while they're recovering, while the town was recovering. They see this here. Hey, we got our little brother walking literally 75 miles from home on his own. Can we take advantage of this in an area that's hostile to our family, potentially, based on what happened previously? Definitely there's wild animals out there to where it's not far-fetched, and they have an opportunity. An opportunity to take care of their brother. Not in the sense that the parents would want you to take care of your siblings, but to get rid of this problem, this tattletale who was obviously sent again to tattle on them as he was previously in, I think, verse 2. And so, they're going to try and kill him. However, when we get to verse 21, but when Reuben heard it, he rescued him out of their hands. Now, Reuben is the oldest. So the oldest, the firstborn, who would have who should have the inherited rights. But we know this family doesn't really do the inherited rights the normal way. They work on stealing each other's blessings. But when Reuben heard it, he rescued him out of their hands, saying, "Let us not take his life." And Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood. Throw him into this pit here in the wilderness, but do not lay a hand on him." And he said that he might rescue him out of their hand to restore him to his father. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the robe of many colors that he wore. Now, why would Reuben do this? The brothers as a group were saying, "Let's kill him, let's kill him." And Reuben goes, "No, no, no." Did he have this extra adoration for his father? Was he trying to regain favor? As we look back at what Reuben had done, so after Rachel, Joseph's mother and Ben's mother, died giving birth to Benjamin, in verse 35, in chapter 35, verse 22, is when Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard of it. Jacob heard of it. We're only 2 chapters after that. So since that time, Jacob's favorite wife, Rachel, had died, and his father had died. That's why they're in Hebron, and he goes up there, seeing his father having these pieces. Is he doing it out of guilt? Is he doing it out of care for his father? I like to hope it's for care for his father, but based on the history of these brothers, he's probably doing it to regain favor, to make up for the amends that he had there. And so as we continue on in verse 24, they took him and threw him into a pit. The pit was empty, there was no water in it. And they sat down to eat. And looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead, with their camels bearing gum, balm, and myrrh, on their way to carry it down to Egypt. Then Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood?" So, going back to God's plan, Gilead is a little bit northeast of where they are in Dothan, just essentially northeast of the Sea of Galilee. And so traders would go north of the Sea of Galilee, down through Dothan, and take the route of the sea to Egypt. And so they go along the coast of Israel, along the eastern side of the Mediterranean Sea, down to Egypt. where the family was in Hebron, which is due east of that. And so these travelers wouldn't have gone through there. So as we start getting to this story further on, I'm dropping little hints to future sermons. That as God's working through these definitely fallen and broken men that are super fallible, and the story of Shechem and them going to Dothan and sending this 17-year-old to go and find them, that he ends up on essentially a trade route from northern Babylonia down to Egypt, two of the largest civilizations at that time, the largest empires during that era, on the main trade route. Not in this fertile valley, but on this trade route to where these Ishmaelites from Gilead, so essentially they're cousins. Ishmaelites pretty much means cousins if you go back a couple generations. That they were headed down towards Egypt. As we get into these next verses, we see that God's plan of going to Shechem, then going up to Dothan, and if that truly was that man in the wilderness that said, "Oh yeah, they're up in Dothan," was an angel continuing to direct that God's working that plan through this whole piece to get them up to Dothan, to where his brothers wanted to kill him. Reuben says, "No, let's not kill him, let's put him in this pit." Then Judah, also he's the fourth oldest, and we even have Judah up there, says, "Oh, again, personal gain. What gain is it for us to kill him?" So we get to verse 27, he says, "Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him. For he is our brother, our own flesh." And his brothers listened to him. Then Midianite traders passed by, and they drew Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit, and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. They took Joseph to Egypt. So on this trade route, from essentially what will become Babylon, down into Egypt, this trade route, they sell him to the Midianites. Is it out of grace? Or is God using his brother's selfish desires for his own good? He turns their fallen humanity, but still continues the story that he's trying to bring forth in the salvation through this brokenness of a family, through these broken men, through these selfish ideals. Let's kill our brother because we're jealous. No, don't kill him because I need to get favor with Dad, and Dad will be really upset with me after what I did before, and if I kill my brother. Oh wait, let's not kill him, let's sell him. Let's get some money out of this thing. Which brings us to the next question we get to share with each other. Which part of the story so far most clearly shows how hard the brothers' hearts had become? Ready, go. So as we continue on, in verse 29, does that mean? Just making sure if I'm moving wrong to get the crackle on. Hey, it stopped. Good. When Reuben returned to the pit and saw that Joseph was not in the pit, he tore his clothes and returned to his brothers and said, "The boy is gone. And I, where shall I go?" Another translation is, "What am I going to do?" Using the I statement. Then they took Joseph's robe and slaughtered a goat and dipped the robes in the blood. And they sent the robe of many colors and brought it to their father and said, "This we have found. Please identify whether it is your son's robe or not." And some of the key pieces in here that I pointed out was the word I. As we look at these brothers, and Reuben being the oldest brother, and his attempt to foil the murder plot. It was an I, me. What am I going to do? How am I going to get out of this? How am I going to deal with this problem? And one of the lessons we learn throughout life, and especially when we discover Christ, is that when I try to fix something, it generally goes poorly. And that's part of the lesson that I think that we can continue to learn from these stories, especially in Genesis, that anytime it's an I'm going to fix this, or I will take it into my own hands, that I get it wrong. And so as we get to the next question here, they take this to their father, hoping to put this whole Joseph thing to rest, asking if this is his robe. So, the question is, have you ever been a part of a joke or observed a joke or a lie that was taken too far? Why was it taken too far? I know this is getting personal. Ready? Share with each other. Children, confess to your parents. The brothers, did they take this too far? Sold their brother into slavery, convinced their dad, or set up to try and convince their dad that he was dead. Which brings us to the next verses, starting in verse 33. And he identified it and said, "It is my son's robe." Logically, he goes, "A fierce animal has devoured him. Joseph is without a doubt torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his garments, and this one always cracks me up, puts on scratchy underwear, sackcloth on his loins, and mourned for his son for many days. All his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted and said, "No, I shall go down to Sheol to my son mourning." Thus his father wept for him. That always gets me. All his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him. His sons are the ones that did this. And they rose up to comfort him. What's going through their minds? Guilt. Oh, did I go too far? Doesn't say they apologized, didn't say that they did any of those things, but they rose up to try and comfort him. Because relationship is still important. God created us for relationship. Even broken relationships, but there is still a longing to correct these relationships and to fix them. Last question is a rhetorical one. Would or could there be any lasting impacts on their relationship after this deceit? How would you feel if you were Reuben, the oldest brother, who tried to save his brother, make amends for his dad, for things that he had done? What about for Judah, who's the one who decided to sell him and fake it? Or the other brothers? Put this onto their father. Obviously there was some fear, some sadness, some guilt, some emotions with regards to, wow, did we go too far? Or, we got to keep covering this up. We don't know what those exact emotions were. So I'm going to give you a suggestion. Give your jealousy and anger to God before you take a regrettable action or make a lasting negative decision. However, the story's not over. As we get to the last verse in chapter 37, meanwhile, the Midianites had sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard. Even though life may be miserable due to current circumstances, lies, attitudes of those around us, family members, God remains faithful to his promises. Stay tuned. Next couple weeks, Dave's going to give a lot more cheerful messages than what I gave today. So thank you, Dave, for the most joyful message to ever be given on a Sunday morning.